Would you like to own a Formula One team? Then you'll need at least $1.2 billion in your pocket. No, you heard that right. Billion, not million. So where does all that money go, and does it actually turn a profit? Let's take a look behind the curtain of a Formula One team. In 2024, the minimum value of an F1 team was set at $700 million. But that's just the entry ticket. Real prices run far higher. The Aston Martin team was bought for just $150 million back in 2018. Today, that same team is worth over $1 billion. Established teams like Red Bull and Mercedes are valued at around $2 billion. That makes this business more expensive than even the priciest sports clubs on Earth. So where exactly does all that money go? First, you need a factory. And not just any factory. A wind tunnel, a carbon fiber production line, supercomputers. Building the wind tunnel alone costs $50 million. Mercedes' factory employs more than 4,000 people. And none of them race on the track. They all work behind the scenes. An F1 team has an average of 900 to 1,200 employees. Engineers, aerodynamicists, data analysts, mechanics. On a race weekend, you'll only see 60 to 80 people trackside. The thousands left behind are already preparing for the next race at the factory. And of course, the two most expensive employees of all, the drivers. Lewis Hamilton's annual salary reaches $60 million. Max Verstappen's contract is worth around $55 million a year. And that's just the salary, before performance bonuses. So who covers these massive costs? Let's move on to the revenue side. An F1 team has three main sources of income. First, the prize money that Formula One itself distributes. Hundreds of millions of dollars are paid out based on championship ranking. Second, sponsorship deals. Every square inch of an F1 car is really rentable ad space. Top teams can earn up to $200 million a year from sponsorship alone. Third, a cut of Formula One's own broadcast and advertising revenue. Combine all three sources, and you get a massive budget. But the spending is just as brutal. This is where the budget cap rule comes in. As of 2024, teams can spend a maximum of $135 million a year. This rule exists to stop wealthy teams from spending without limit. But driver salaries and certain costs are excluded from the cap. So real total spending is much higher than it looks. So after all this risk and expense, is it even possible to turn a profit? For some teams, the answer is a clear yes. But for small and mid-sized teams, the picture looks very different. Let's take a closer look at where that difference comes from. Nobody can build the engine, the heart of an F1 car, alone. Only 4 manufacturers build their own engines: Mercedes, Ferrari, Honda, Renault. Every other team has to lease those engines. A single season's engine supply deal costs $15 to $20 million. For a manufacturer wanting to develop its own engine, the cost is far higher. That's why most teams choose to buy the engine instead of building it. But what if there's a crash? This is where things get truly expensive. Replacing a front wing alone can cost $30,000 to $40,000. A chassis, the car's main structure, costs close to $2 million. A heavy crash can destroy all of these parts in a single weekend. That's why every team sets aside a separate budget for spare parts. And those costs also eat into that $135 million cap. So one driver mistake steals directly from the engineering budget. Now let's look at the other side of the money. The sponsorship wars. Every inch of an F1 car is ad space, sold at a different price. The most expensive zone, the engine cover and the side pods. A single logo there can cost $10 to $20 million a year. The most expensive of all is title sponsorship, which goes into the team's name. Putting your brand in front of a team's name can cost $50 million or more. For small teams, the picture is much more modest. They try to get by with logos from a few local businesses. And this is exactly where F1's real class divide shows up. Some teams are born rich, others fight to survive every single year. Now let's compare these two worlds with real examples. Rich teams max out the budget cap every single year because their sponsors are wealthy enough to reach that ceiling with ease. But a low-budget team often stays well below that cap. The reason is simple. They can't find enough sponsors. They race under the same rules, but without the same pockets. That's why the same teams usually end up at the bottom of the standings. So in this picture, who's actually making a profit and who's losing? Thanks to the budget cap, spending is capped, but income isn't. That's why the big established teams can now post regular profits. For mid and small teams, it's still break even or a loss. But here's the interesting part. No team is just a race team anymore. F1 teams have become investment assets. The Williams team was sold to an investment fund for about $150 million in 2020. Today, that same team is worth several times that figure. Billions of dollars have flowed into McLaren from the Middle East and sports investment funds. For wealthy investors, owning an F1 team has become a status symbol, just like owning a private yacht or a football club. But that status comes at a price, constantly rising competitive pressure, because F1 itself has become a rapidly growing global business. Thanks to a Netflix documentary, F1's audience exploded in recent years. More viewers means more sponsors, which means more money. So this business is a far more complex economic machine than it looks. Now for the real question. Is getting into this business actually worth it? The answer isn't simple. It depends on who you ask. For a billionaire, it's a passion project they can afford to lose. For an investment fund, it's a long-term asset that compounds in value. But if you think this game is risk-free, you're wrong. First, rule changes can wipe out your entire advantage overnight. When aerodynamic regulations change, even the best car can suddenly fall behind. Second, exceed the budget cap, and heavy penalties await you. In 2021, a top team paid millions in fines for exceeding the cap. Third, sporting failure triggers a downward spiral of lost sponsors. One bad season can shrink your budget for the following year too. Now let's look at a few names who actually took this risk. Gene Haas owned an American machine tool company. He entered F1 on a limited budget and built one of the smallest teams. Even after years at the bottom of the standings, he's still on the grid. Lawrence Stroll bought a failing team and turned it into a luxury brand. He poured his fashion and automotive fortune into a new power center in F1. Dietrich Mateschitz turned an energy drink empire into F1 dominance. Today, that brand is one of the most dominant teams in F1. But not everyone gets into this club so easily. A new team entering F1 has to pay compensation to the existing teams. This entry fee runs around $200 million. That makes F1 one of the most exclusive business clubs in the world, and that only drives up the value for the teams already inside. So is F1 the only option? Or are there other tracks out there? F1 isn't the only motorsport. So what budgets do the others run on? NASCAR is America's most popular motorsport, but building a NASCAR team is far cheaper than building an F1 team. An average NASCAR team can operate on a budget of $20 to $30 million a year. In MotoGP, things run on an even smaller scale. A MotoGP team can compete on a budget of around $10 to $15 million. Formula E is a fast-growing series that races with electric cars. It's sustainability-focused, but budgets are still far behind F1's. So why is F1 so much more expensive than all of them? First, F1's technology and R&D intensity is the highest of them all. Second, its global brand value and prestige premium are far higher. Third, racing in 24 different countries a year means enormous logistics costs. After every race, all the equipment is flown to the next country. Fourth, the biggest TV audience means the biggest sponsorship pie. So F1's high cost isn't an accident. It's a direct result of its sheer scale. Let's put all these numbers side by side, briefly. F1. Billion-dollar team values, a $135 million annual budget cap. NASCAR. Team values in the tens of millions, a much lower annual cost. MotoGP and Formula E. A far more accessible entry point into motorsport. But none of them can compete with F1's global prestige and financial muscle. And that's exactly why wealthy investors keep flocking to F1. Now let's briefly wrap up everything we've learned. Let's look at how this money is actually spent day to day. A race weekend. Friday practice, Saturday qualifying, and Sunday the race itself. Dozens of containers of equipment are flown from country to country for every race. Even the team's motorhome, its mobile headquarters, is a luxury in itself. Sponsors are hosted here, VIP guests dine, and deals get signed. So a race weekend is basically a mobile 5-star hotel. Trackside, seconds are worth millions of dollars. A pit stop tire change is completed in under 2 seconds. The crew rehearses for months just for those 2 seconds. Behind the garage sits a separate war room called the strategy room. Here, weather, tire wear, and rival data are analyzed constantly. Before the race, drivers practice on a digital twin of the real track. A single professional simulator can cost millions of dollars. So every square inch, every second, is a calculated investment. But all that calculation doesn't guarantee a win for everyone, because F1 history has real examples showing this business can collapse. In 2014 and 2015, 2 teams declared bankruptcy back-to-back. Unable to find enough sponsors, these teams shut their doors overnight. Hundreds of engineers and mechanics lost their jobs at once. The equipment and factories were sold off at auction. This is F1's harshest truth. There is no such thing as a guarantee here. So, who runs this risky game? Meet the team principal. A team principal has to act like both a CEO and an athlete. On one hand, managing the budget. On the other, building race strategy. And all the while, constantly answering for it in front of the cameras. Under this pressure, every decision can affect millions of dollars. Now let's bring everything we've learned together for a final assessment. So which team is actually the most valuable? Let's run through a quick ranking. Ferrari sits at the top of the list, valued at over $4 billion. Its secret, 75 years of legacy and a passionate Italian fan base. Mercedes, with its tech giant image, sits in the $2 to $3 billion range. Red Bull, powered by its energy drink empire, sits at a similar level. McLaren is a historic name, rapidly gaining value with new investors. Aston Martin is the rising star Lawrence Stroll, transformed. Williams is a legendary name recovering with investment fund backing. Alpine is a French automaker's project still searching for its value. Haas is the American team surviving on the most modest budget of all. And with Audi's new entry, a fresh name has joined the rankings. So does all this value come only from racing performance? No. Ticket and merchandise sales are also a massive revenue stream. A Grand Prix weekend draws hundreds of thousands of fans to a single track. VIP box packages can sell for tens of thousands of dollars per person. Team-branded caps, t-shirt, and jerseys also bring in millions a year. So revenue doesn't just flow from the track, but from the stands and the shops too. Now let's take a closer look at the brightest example on this list. That team is both a race team and one of the world's most recognized car brands. This dual identity earns money on the street and on the track at the same time. Even when a road car is sold, its value feeds off track success. But not every brand starts out this lucky. Here's the story of a new player. A major American automaker wanted to enter F1 under its own name. It first faced strong resistance from the existing teams Because a new team means slicing the existing pie into smaller pieces. After long negotiations, the new team was finally admitted to the club. This story shows that getting into F1 takes not just money, but persuasion and patience. So who actually runs F1 itself? A major American media company bought F1 in 2017. After that acquisition, F1 stopped being just a sport and became an entertainment brand. New cities pay a hefty hosting fee just to bring F1 to town. That fee can climb as high as $50 to $70 million for some races. The Las Vegas Grand Prix is the most striking example. The city turned the race into a festival. That weekend, hotel prices multiply and restaurants stay booked for weeks. So a single race can add billions of dollars to the host city's economy. That also puts cities in competition with each other to host F1. New race venues are the freshest examples of that competition. So F1 isn't just a race anymore, it's a global city marketing tool. F1 also launched a separate development series to advance women drivers. It's both a social step and a move to open up a new market. Super VIP areas sell experiences worth thousands of dollars per person. Dining, behind-the-scenes tours, and meet and greets with drivers are part of the package. So F1 has built an experience economy that goes far beyond classic ticket revenue. Now, let's boil everything we've learned down to one question and wrap up our journey. Let's go back to the start. Remember that $1.2 billion price tag? That number was only the beginning. Then came the factory, the staff, the drivers. Then we saw the revenue side: prize money, sponsorship, broadcast rights. We learned how the budget cap tries to balance the whole game. We saw how crash risk can wipe out a budget in an instant. We looked at the gulf between the rich teams and the struggling ones. We saw how teams have turned into investment assets. And we understood why F1 is so different from other motorsports. Now let's boil all of this down to a single question. Is owning an F1 team actually worth it? The answer changes depending on who you are in 3 different ways. Profile 1. Billionaires. For them, it's a passion and status investment. Even if they lose, they're only risking a small slice of their fortune. Profile 2. Investment funds. For them, it's a fast-growing asset class, a portfolio piece that rises in value every year and can be resold for profit. Profile 3. An ordinary entrepreneur or investor. The answer is a clear no. The entry cost, the risk, and the competition keep this league open to very few. In other words, this isn't a game everyone gets to play. So where is this massive business headed in the years ahead? Electric and sustainable technologies are rapidly entering F1's agenda. In the near future, greener fuels and hybrid systems will become mandatory. At the same time, new markets in America, the Middle East, and Asia are growing fast. New tracks are opening in new cities, and new audiences are being won over. That growth keeps pushing the value of existing teams even higher. So today's $1.2 billion entry ticket could be far higher tomorrow. That's a huge advantage for anyone who gets in early. So in light of all this, is F1 really a sport or a financial game? Maybe the answer is both. It's raced on the track and on the market at the same time. And that dual nature is exactly what makes F1 so fascinating. So what about you? If you had $1.2 billion, would you take this risk? Or would you put that money somewhere far safer? Share your answer with us in the comments. If you're curious about the real economics behind businesses like this, you're in the right place. See you in the next video, behind the scenes of another massive business.